All right. Well, welcome. Here we are. We've taken a little bit of a break, but we're back now, and we have our first guest. And we'll just say, it doesn't feel like a month of Sundays, but it's been a little bit. But welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, and of course, our host, Asif, and myself. What do you got to say today, Asif? What do you think?
Well, I'm just as excited as I.
Yeah, you feel it. Ay, 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 ay. Ah, yeah. I haven't done that in a while, but yes, I can feel it. It's like coffee, right? But here we go.
What else there to do on a Sunday morning if you're not doing AyAyAyAi, right? Yeah, look, I think learning is what got us going. I think we're close to 60 some episodes at this point, and
Nice.
every guest, brings such a flavor, and it's mind-boggling. So, I want to start off this podcast because, in a way, I want to kind of warn the audience that you're going to go through multiple emotions. I want to start off in the right path because this is not something that I was very accustomed to researching, and when I started researching, it was very mind-boggling. And what I mean by that is, I shared the show notes with everybody yesterday, and I was reading through the show notes, and I was thinking to myself, like, this is just such a difficult discussion to have, but we have to and make it informal. We have to kind of allow ourselves to sip into this conversation because I'll tell you one example that I thought of very much last night. It's like when you think about a medical situation and can try to explain that to people. I don't think Alzheimer's dementia is that easy to explain to people. It's sort of like your brain can visualize what it's like to drive down a road when it's dark, pitch dark, and you have your headlights on. Like you don't do that, but if you can imagine what it'd be like, it'd be terrible, right? But imagine on a daylight you are driving down the road and you have no idea the geospatial information. What state are you in? Are you in Alabama or you're in Tennessee? You don't even understand what it is that you're doing other than driving down the road. Like your brain cannot imagine that. And I thought, well, you can look at other situations where you look at a patient and you say, like, that patient is bedridden and has these sort of things going on in their life. But when you look at an Alzheimer's dementia patient, it's just a normal person, but you have no idea what this person is going through. And that person has no idea that you're even thinking about this person. I think that disconnect is so. I'm not going to put a word around that. I'll let the audience, come up with their own thoughts behind it because that is such an unimaginable experience, in my opinion. So I'm super lucky and super happy to have Jenny in the conversation because Jenny got me started in a path that I wasn't really thinking of, but now that I am, it has become not just about the family, not just about the patient, but society, the workspace, the ability for us to tackle this issue going forward. Because I'll let Jenny explain more of these, but thank you, Jenny, for making the time on a Sunday
Yeah.
morning. For ay 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 ay.
Ay, 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 ay.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
I'm gonna have to practice a few different versions of that one. I think
You,
myself
you
to
get
get
another
mine
chance
on.
at the end of
Okay,
the,
I was gonna say I
end
gotta
of
get
the
my own
Just
down here.
yeah, just think hot sauce. Like, okay, just think. Okay, I just had the hottest hot sauce, and for some reason, the margarita's coming next, and just you have that spirit. You can feel it coming out of you. Hot sauce and margaritas will bring it out. But welcome, Jenny. On tell us more. And he really started to open up on what our area, what we're going to be talking about today, Alzheimer's, and what that means to all of our anyone that watches or pays attention to our podcast. We address different things, but again, tell us more about how you affect that area and how you help support that Alzheimer's.
Well, it affects me as much as I affect it. First off, I want to say, but I've been working in senior living for the last 12 years. And in that sense, just day in and day out, I have been um, purposefully taking care of those that are affected, those that are going to be affected, that might not have as serious of a knowledge yet of their cognitive decline, but also then the families. that are involved with these individuals. And in that sense, I have seen just like Asif said, is so many different emotions. And that goes from fear and study, study, study. I got to know everything and what's it going to be like and what's going to happen next and what's the next step and the next step and the next step. And there's there's not a guaranteed next step that's going to be the same for everybody with this disease. In fact, there aren't two people with dementia that have the exact same experience, and so you can kind of give them estimations and guesstimations and what to watch for, but there is no way to tell a family member what to expect next because it can either jump several levels and go super fast, or it can suddenly kind of go to a screeching halt and just stop for a while. And those emotions just tear people up, just tear people up, waiting for the when is
Mhm.
it going to happen? When is it going to be over? When is this going to hit a final stage? And it's very long.
I have a question. Okay, I created a mortality algorithm. So it in my head, okay, so for me, how do I start to like I'm good at putting numbers or something to data, but
Hmm.
this is outside of data. This is real. So when you
Yeah.
start to see, like, when do you start to worry? When do you say, hey, I need to maybe get looked at or get
Yeah.
tested? And then, how does that progress? Because, I'll be honest with you. I'm gray. He Asif looks great.
Uh huh.
I'm not aging as so I feel like I forget stuff all the time. So how do I start to
Yeah.
feel that maybe I should get tested, or maybe my dad, or you know what I mean? How do you start that? Or what do you feel?
Recommendations are that anybody over the age of 50 should start having their primary care doctor a cognitive test. It's called a mini cog, at their annual physicals. And that way you have a baseline that you can be watching for. In that sense, they will start to notice differences for you potentially at the same time. But I would say if you're ever concerned about yourself, go ahead and ask your doctor at that next physical.
Mhm.
But there's a big difference between regular aging and actual dementia.
Yeah.
And we all start to get a little scared nowadays. The more and more we talk about Alzheimer's and dementia, the more and more everybody thinks that because they can't remember where the car keys are or where they left the phone, that, oh my goodness, I must have it. I'm catching it, and it's like, nah, it's not something you can catch. But there's a very big difference. So some of the signs that would show a difference is are you having difficulty completing very basic tasks? Things that are so super familiar to you that you have been doing, most of your life, basic tasks. Um, are you having more confusion than normal in your own normal life? And are you having trouble visualizing images or having spatial awareness for what's around you?
Mhm.
So, are things actually kind of like in the mirror in your car? What's it called? Things might appear closer than they actually
Yeah.
are sign. That's spatial awareness is
Oh,
to
okay.
know the difference in that sense. But you know what, forgetting that you just said something, repeating things frequently. One of the things is not remembering that you've just repeated conversations. And a lot of us go through and multitask in what we're doing while we're listening to other people talk. And in some sense, we might go ahead and repeat what we just said. But if you're really focusing in and you're telling a story, and then 5 minutes later you're telling that same person the same exact story, and they're like, "Wait, you already told me this." That's a little bit of a yellow flag that says, "Hey, caution, caution," especially if it's happening frequently. In that sense, but even then, guys, do you know that it may not be something that's Alzheimer's and dementia related? One of the most common misconceptions for what people think could be Alzheimer's or dementia ends up being just a typical urinary tract infection.
Mhm.
one of the most basic infections, and it can cause a lot of the same cognitive issues. So, and that's why it's important not to guess whether you have this disease or not, and to go see your doctor and verify that there's not some interaction between a lot of the different medicines you're on, that might be causing this, or that it's not a simple infection. So,
You had a hard job of explaining what is hard to really explain, right?
Mm.
And you have to
yeah.
do it in a podcast. You have to do it with the family. You have to do it with the patient. You have
Mhm.
to talk to the community, and I think that's when you caught me off guard. Is community not understanding this issue
Right.
causes havoc in doubts and confusions and the only thing that doesn't come out of this whole community situation is the curiosity
Yeah.
because nobody's willing to say, well, this person, whatever that is, I'm not curious to find out. It just seemed very odd, and I'm just going to move past it, right? Not really going to
Mm.
address it as a person who has their cognitive ability fully functioning. Cognitive
Right.
inability is not something that we are very comfortable with dealing with, right?
No, not
Because
at all
we just don't
comfortable.
know how they will react. And when you mentioned all the troubles that you have dealt with, we don't think about the finance side of things. We're not thinking
Sure.
about workspace. We're not thinking about what does that look like for national level, right? What's the opportunity cost for the next generation, right? Um, that's a rabbit hole to go down in, right?
It can go off and branch in so many different arenas,
Mhm.
and that's what's so overwhelming to people and why they don't want to go see if they have it. They don't want to go and seek advice and treatment,
Yeah.
because it is that scary with all of the what ifs and unknowns still. That and the minute they state that they're a little concerned about themselves. Oh my gosh, somebody's not going to let me make my own decisions. Oh my gosh, they're going to take my home away from me. They're going to take my car away from me, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you're just barely, you're still on the lines of, I can't find my keys. I must have dementia. If I tell somebody, they're going to take my car away from me. It people go to that extreme very quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Very
Yeah.
quickly. So why would you want to if you're afraid your independence is going to be taken away? You know? And it
Yeah.
really doesn't have to be taken away. And that's where if we start running towards this conversation instead of running away from this diagnosis and conversation, people can get diagnosed earlier. And if you get diagnosed earlier, you have the better opportunity to take part in your own care planning for as
Mm.
it progresses.
that's
And so it's actually as much as anything with this disease can be a positive, it's a positive to go and get early diagnosed because you can then take control of what you want the next phases to look like, and you can know ahead of time what it's going to be, and have a say. And having a say is a big deal. And you will fight for that say as you are progressing and people start taking away your independence to doing things. You're going to fight for it, but you're not going to understand why. They're
yeah.
right. You can't do it. So you might as well go ahead and set up all of your plans ahead of time.
I think you're bringing up something that is super important because you've seen it, I've seen it, where families are well, you don't even have to, rely on us. You can go to YouTube and find testimonies of
Hmm.
people that said, when my parents started experiencing this, the transition was what took us away from the progression of the situation, right, the
Yeah.
disease. Because if I knew the transformation was happening, I probably would have tackled it better versus by the time the disease progressed to a
Hmm.
stage 4 or stage 3, I'm still dealing with my own emotion rather than the emotion of the patient or the well-being of the patient. I
Hmm.
think it serves both the patient and the family for the patient to say, if I'm diagnosing myself to going down this path in a stage 1, I should prepare my kids. I should prepare my family members
Yeah.
because if they have that awareness instead of having it just dumped into their laps one day, they're going to be able to go emotionally prepare for that because it kept me up at night. Like I kid you not, like I'm a very good sleeper, but I was up at last night. I just couldn't fathom the fact that my son will be able to look at me and say, "Why is my dad, you know, not responding to when I call him dad?" It's emotionally tearing.
And that right there is one of the other common reasons I hear from seniors. And I'm like, have you spoken with your kids about this concern? Oh no, I do not want to burden them. I don't want to make them worry. They have enough going on. No, no, it's not time for that yet. And there is never a good time for it. There will never be. But they are worried, just like you're talking about right now, is how am I going to make them feel? I'm going to scare them with this. So they don't want to bring it in.
Yeah. So now I'm trying to better understand. So the early detection is the better. The earlier, the better the detection, and
Hmm.
you can set a baseline and like set like a digital biomarker that says, hey, this is where I'm at now,
Yeah.
and then you can progress. So what are the different stages? Because you guys
Hmm.
mentioned it. So there's stage one, and how treatable is this? Because it's stage one as you get because obviously it sounds like stage
Yes.
four. You're already you're like one foot in the grave, or I'm not sure, but or
No.
you already lost, and you're like somewhere that you can't recover from, or what stages can it be treated, and you
Oh, look
figure,
at
okay,
what
I
you
can
just
still
said.
hold on to life.
You just said recover from.
Okay, recover or be treated.
There's no cure for this disease.
Okay.
They can't recover from it. And it's what makes it so very different than any other disease out there, y'all. Um, the senior that's affected by this doesn't get to go, like many other diseases, cancer, people get done and they go into remission, they get to go ring a bell, right? We get very excited, we get to ring the bell. And our families cheer and are so proud that we made it through the fight. We fought hard. The senior affected by this, they don't have a bell to ring at the end. And so I've always felt that this is not their fight to go through. This is the family's fight.
Mm,
And unfortunately, when the family makes it to the end, it's not going to be, hey, let's ring a bell and celebrate. It's going to be that their parent has transitioned and passed away. And it's a whole different scenario than just about every other disease out there in that sense. So, but to go back to your questions, there are a few different ways of staging it. Some people do mild, moderate, severe. There's also a stage 1 through 7 process that people look at, and there's a stage 1, 2, and 3 process. So it just kind of depends on what you want to look at. Right now, typically, most people, by the time they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, they're already at a stage 3, possibly a stage 4. And it's because it's not that serious right now. It's not affecting me. And I'm just getting older. This is old people's disease. I'm just losing my memory. And that's, again, that hesitancy and inability to want to face things and talk about it, running away from it. You're so far progressed at that point that now you're more in crisis mode of figuring out next steps with your family that are more urgent in nature, versus being able to take your time and plan it. If people will find out early on, all right, if they are still at the mild cognitive impairment stage, which is typically the very first signs, then that or stage 1, then there are still some medications that can possibly help them. And this has been our biggest hope so far in research are these amyloid fighting drugs that are coming out. Some had been very controversial because they were so very expensive. And now there are numerous ones coming down the line from that very first one that are showing some success in either um, slowing the progression or freezing the progression. So that's where it could be prevented from getting worse, potentially. There's still no guarantee for everybody that takes these drugs that it's going to work. The last percentage I heard, and I'm so sorry if I'm wrong on this, was 12% of people that had been taking that Aduhelm had either a slow in progression or a freeze in progression. And that means that anybody that ends up having Alzheimer's started out with mild cognitive impairment, or we call that MCI, and then it progressed to Alzheimer's. But with these drugs, the hope is that okay, everybody's still gonna have NCI that would potentially have this disease, but maybe it doesn't get to Alzheimer's in that sense, you know. So those are some of the benefits as well of getting early detected is you could get in on some of these medications at these trials and have some really good potential for having a better experience than most through it.
Speaking of amyloid,
Hmm.
we think about plaque buildup, and this plaque buildup, this one needs to be cleaned up inside of our neurons, and you are talking about 86 billion neurons in an adult brain versus 2
Oh my
billion that we
goodness.
start off with, right?
Wow.
So if you think about that 2 billion to 86 billion in progress, of course the brain is not going to develop the same way as the other 2 billion neurons sitting next to you in your twin sisters and brothers, or anybody in your family. It's
Uh-uh.
going to grow totally different based on the space and time that you've lived in, and your experiences and events that you've been part of. So, as we go through life, one things that we have experienced mainly is other people's disease, and when we experience our own disease, we necessarily don't approach it the same way that we would recommend somebody else
Hmm.
handle their disease. The reason I brought that up is because we talked about sleep, we talked about stress, we talked about sugar. You can take that bucket and say, put all the disease on top of it and see how that impacts those disease. Um, I don't know, but I think the research is working towards figuring out like a single cause or single DNA helix that is causing this issue, or proteins or something like that that's causing this. But it's mind-boggling to me to understand that. Look, first of all, if it happens to somebody else, you will have a different approach. But the
Hmm.
reason it happens to you, and when it does, it's really hard to understand that your brain is shrinking.
Yeah.
And that's like, well, how does a brain shrink?
Hmm.
And tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's been the most fascinating part of like trying to understand dementia and Alzheimer's. It's like, what? Like, I, I'm not. No, there's no way for me to comprehend that because the brain cannot understand how a brain shrinks. You know, and the plaques. I mean, this is a whole nother level of conversation, but I think
Uh-huh.
that's been the most amazing part to understand Alzheimer's dementia
Hmm.
from that perspective.
Yeah, the and that is going to be going into the neurons like you're speaking of and the DNA genetics is going to be a lot out of my wheelhouse actually.
Yeah.
Now, what I can tell you on a few of these things is going to be that even if you're a carrier of the gene because your parents or grandparents had it, it doesn't mean the gene's going to be activated. Okay. So some people go out and get these tests and like, I want to know, I want to know, I want to know. I had a friend that, oh, actually, I had just met her when I heard this. And of course, whenever people find out what I do for a living, they're like, oh, my mom had it, or my grandma had Alzheimer's or dementia, and they all have their little story, you know. So even out in just my own personal time, it becomes we end up with stories. I can be out. I race whippets, and when I'm out on the lure coursing field, somebody's on the side of me saying, "I've noticed you do a lot with Alzheimer's, and hey, my aunt is battling with this," and you start. It's everywhere. So, but with that DNA, it doesn't mean it's going to be activated. And so, a friend of mine had her mom die really young with it, and so the first time I'm meeting her, 5 6 years ago, she ended up getting the test herself, and she said, "I have the gene." And I'm already seeing a lot of signs, so I'm looking for a doctor now so I can start talking to them. Y'all, she's 35 years old, all right, and the signs were normal memory issues likely. Okay. Not going to say they weren't. I'm not a physician, but that one test put it in her head that when's it going to happen, when's it going to happen, when's it going to happen. And it's been 8 years ago, and I have watched her go from that moment to even more recently. It's getting bad. I'm going to go and I'm going to start some more serious testing now. And it's been 8 years, y'all. She has climbed to the top of the organizations that she is running now, that she had just been working in.
Right.
And let me tell you, from all signs, and again, outsider's perspective, everything's firing at top notch level, but that one test that long ago has never gone out of her mind.
Mhm.
And I truly just hope it's never prevented her from, realizing some dream or something that she's wanted to try to do because she's afraid, that this could impact it down the road. But that's what I say. People will ask me, should I get the test? Should I get
Yeah.
the test?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it depends on your mental capability to handle what it's going to tell you. I would definitely do a lot of soul searching because right now that test isn't going to tell you anything until there's signs and symptoms. And then you can start working towards the other aspects of it. But when we get to the brain, though, the health of the brain, and why it shrinks, I don't know why it shrinks. Again, not a physician. I can't describe that very well. But the health aspect that everybody is coming to find out more and more, the prevalence of your healthy diet and cardio exercise. All right. They
Right.
say what's good for your heart is good for your brain. And the biggest reason for that is I believe it's around a third of the blood that circulates through your heart comes up to the brain and then back down. And
Mm.
so that is pumping the oxygen up in and through your brain. And so if your heart's healthy, it'll be pumping at the right rate and you'll have that extra oxygen in your brain. So that's one of the more simple ways to look at the health and nutrition aspect of it. And that's going to be, more Greek and Mediterranean style diets. All
Mm.
right. So low fat, less red meat, all the good stuff, right? But then also, take care of your cholesterol, take care of your blood pressure, and add in the fruits and veggies. And then when you get into the exercise aspect component of it, the cardio seems to be more important than the all around. And the all around is still important, okay? But the cardio aspect of it is most important right now, from what they're seeing.
Yeah, that's like the simplest way to just think about it, right? Like
Hmm.
it works for everything, like that sleep, sugar, and stress, right?
Yes.
If you're stressed,
Hmm.
you create a different kind of chemical, but good stress is also a good chemical, right? So bad stress
Hmm.
is what they cause the bad chemical, but the blood
Yep.
rushing is simply something that you just have to think about, like where is your blood actually heading towards, and where is it getting stopped and coming right back? That makes perfect sense. It's like a
Yeah.
well plumbed machine, right?
Yeah.
It's a good plumbing system. So your friend's story kind of led me into thinking about a whole lot of these thin slicing of decision making, where a single experience and single decision has led her 8 years later into a path that where she probably didn't imagine to be in, but here she is, and 8 years later, with an experience that she probably didn't expect as an outcome. But I love that story because it reminds me of where to look for what and where to look for the solution. So last year in summer, we put a team of six together, including myself, where I led the charge of understanding Alzheimer dementia. And I'll tell you
Right.
what, the failure of it was immense because that failure has allowed me to learn a lot more than what I anticipated learning because I was looking for a solution, not necessarily just to learn from it. And learning from it is what I'm at right now because um, we did some part of it and then we got the subject matter expert involved. And once we got the subject matter expert involved, she said, you've identified the wrong problem, right? You've identified the wrong problem. Of course, that led you down into wrong decision making.
Yep.
And once that happened, I was like, okay, what do we do now, right? So I had to eat my own dog food, sort of, because that's what I tell all the AI machine learning developers, all the AI machine learning decision
Mhm.
makers, people that are investing money into AI machine learning, that this happens a lot more frequently than you would like it to happen. Where you go down this path and you're trying to resolve a situation, and at the end you realize, well, I didn't really resolve anything because there's nothing to really resolve it this way. You have to start
Mhm.
identifying differently, label it correctly, and then make the decision. And anybody who's listening, who's not in AI machine learning world, that's the three component of AI machine learning. You really have to identify and label things correctly and make the best decisions. But if you identify the wrong topic, you will label something unnecessary. That decision never really impacted anything, right? You have to go back to the drawing board and start identifying again. So one thing we have identified last year, like I said, we started on a wrong foot, not a wrong foot necessarily, just a path that we we couldn't really comprehend because
Mhm.
we don't have the subject matter expertise. But once we got the subject matter expert, they really put us on the right path. And we have identified that the disease itself is very hard to diagnose, first of all, and to detect it and to treat it is a world of community work, as in you have to put a full village and a city together to address the issues of detection and diagnosis and treatment.
You do.
What was really necessary is that you really have to get the families and have the family become aware and uh, augment the family with artificial intelligence, right? Because what happens with this disease versus the other diseases that see when you talk about like a ringing the bell, we know that ringing the bell situation because it's been well marketed. People are
Mhm.
aware of what that ringing the bell means. If
Yep.
you don't, you can look it up and very easily find that. It's because a cancer patient doesn't need observation 24 hours a day.
Yep.
Where artificial intelligence have to probably augment the family to watch somebody for 24 hours a day. And I mean that with all sincerity, as in all 24 hours a day. This is
Yeah.
literally taking care of a child. So that the impact to the family is far more immense than with
Mhm.
any other disease, if I may say so, right? I
Yeah.
think I have high confidence to say that this disease require more patient care than any other disease, right?
Absolutely, it does, and it takes
And this is
two
like something that they're
caregivers.
able to do on their own. So they're not really bedridden. They really are moving around like an adult, but they think they're a 16-year-old in a 7-year-old
Yes.
body, and they go
Yes.
out of their house and they're out in the street. They can cause havoc to the family that
Yeah.
has somebody who they have to take care of with Alzheimer's dementia. So
Yeah.
with artificial intelligence, we're really pivoted towards that path to help and augment the family that is dealing with this in whatever stage of the progression it's in. Really want to hit on that point with you because
Yeah.
we talked a few things about that. And tell us a little bit more about it. Like, where are you seeing this progressing towards?
As far as the families, you guys know that statistically it takes two caregivers to take care of one person with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so that's where it's becoming more and more of a concern that we need the extra technology in order to offset some of those concerns in the sense of monitoring, right? So, and that's monitoring for safety and monitoring for good decisions. And but then of course there's so many ways it could be used then to implement different engagement techniques with the person with Alzheimer's. But when we really just focus and look at it in regards to the caregivers or the families, my goodness, two people, all right, two people are affected to take care of one person. And so those two people likely also have full-time jobs, all right? And they also are middle age or middle age. They're likely middle wage as well for income, middle class income. And they have to have that job. They have to have that job in order to be able to continue to care for their loved one that's fighting Alzheimer's, especially when the majority of the people that are affected with this disease don't have the financial ability to take care of themselves. And so families are more and more having to contribute to their care, both financially and then when they can't financially, that means doing it themselves. And how do you do it yourself when you also have a huge responsibility at work that you have to get done in order to continue to make money to and the cycle just goes, right? The
Right.
cycle just continues and it's always going to get worse is the biggest thing that anybody needs to learn from this is that's why we have to come up with more modern solutions and AI is one of those things that could literally just break open this ability to solve what the workplace issues are becoming and are just going to get worse with. And one of the reasons I say it's only going to get worse with the coming decades is in 2030, y'all. So that's 6.5 years from now. One in six people are going to be over the age of 65. And guess what? People over the age of 65 are the ones most likely to get Alzheimer's or have Alzheimer's or dementia. And so it's already going to be affected. That means 1 in 6 are going to have it. So what does that mean about how many people are now going to be affected in the workplace and caring for those people? And then you can get your numbers down. Asif, I know you said you're big into the data and the numbers. So the next data is then let's jump to 2050. And 1 in 4 people are going to be over the age of 65. And we're not repopulating the planet enough, guys, in order to have a younger generation here to take care of the aging population. It's not catching up to it. So in that sense, now you've got 1 in 4 people over the age of 65, and it takes 2 people to take care of them, whether that's financially or physically. In that sense, that means even more workplaces affected. And where my mind goes is the economy. I get even more concerned about how do we have so many workplace interruptions. We've seen what workplace interruptions during COVID did, right? But now imagine this as a long term and with that much more of a population that's affected in that sense. So you're at work, you're working on a project and you've got a deadline, but the phone keeps ringing from your parent at home and it's regarding something. Hey, what am I supposed to eat for lunch?
Yeah.
Oh, mom, don't forget I left you something in the fridge. It's got your name on it and it has instructions. Warm in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. Stir it and put it back in again. And 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, ring, ring, and it's, what am I going to have for lunch? I'm hungry, and lunch is 2 hours away. And this person's trying to knock out a project. And it's like, mom, it's not lunchtime yet. Why do you need to know now? Well, as they say, their world is very small. And so their basic routines throughout the day are not going to be super extravagant and detailed. And their day is not going to be full of a million things like it is in ours right now. And so it is one of the most important things. I know Asif, you and I talked about the remote controls. I told him when he's like, if there's one thing you could fix, it's find a way for people not to lose the remote control. And it can become as simple as you said. Hey, we don't need remote controls. We've got Siri, we've got Alexa, we got Google, and we can just say, hey Google, hey Siri. But you know what? In this disease, we age backwards. And so people aren't going to know what that means any longer, even if they were one of the ones that might have created it. At some point, they're going to age backwards if they have this disease, and they're only going to know what a remote control is. They might even start calling it the clicker. Where's the clicker? I mean, it just goes backwards. So that becomes the other aspect of the AI that you have to figure out is, but they're going backwards in age. So will they even know what the technology is to know how to comprehend it? And most of the time, short-term memory is affected as well. So learning something new is going to be hard. And that's where I would ask you, Asif, is how can we teach AI to adjust backwards in time with that person's mentality and the disease? That's way over my pay grade, y'all.
I have a lot to say, but I think Lucky is, I'm seeing Lucky, having some thoughts going on. Like, Lucky, what are you thinking? You're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you
Yeah.
guys hear feedback?
No, no feedback. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think yeah, a lot of ideas come to mind. We work a lot with telehealth and the agency that I support, and we're moving a lot of being able to diagnose and support um, patients at home. Now,
Okay.
how much of that? I think you could start to say, okay, a lot of this, because for what I'm listening here is preventable. You diagnose early. A lot of things like other, and I wanted to say comorbidities. I don't know that I get tongue twisted,
Ah,
but there's some things that other than the having the DNA, you're having the chemical makeup where you are more uh, you're more prevalent to having or having Alzheimer's, and then there's other things that aggravate it, like diet and maybe comorbidities, like maybe your diet can also lead to diabetes, to
yeah.
maybe heart problems. But a lot of these things, you know, may cause it to progress faster or slower depending on your health. So what I'm thinking is, you know, over time there could be an algorithm as long as people are willing to accept the fact that they're going to be tracked a little closer. They may have to have some, but this seems like it's preventable over time. We just have to be able to accept, like you said, the fact that that is a hard truth. You have to say, okay, I have to accept whatever the data is as it is, and if I don't or do, sometimes we tend to self-diagnose, but really trust the fact that if there is early detection, to because I'll tell you, there's other areas that men don't want to hear. Like there's other types of detection for men, and men don't want any part of it. you know and this is one of those
Ah,
things where something like this, again, we're scared to approach it because this is real. But I really support you and the efforts that you have to really bring this to light, because it scares me. It sounds like, at the end you have a big bright memory, everything is real, all of a sudden you're put in a box
mhm.
and you don't know where you're at. And that's kind of where I see, Alzheimer's is that you have a really tough, people have it really tough. And the more
Yeah,
we can do to support and create awareness, I think, is the solution.
yeah,
Awareness,
yeah.
and then we can kind of figure it out. But uh,
Mm.
I have a lot of thoughts. Don't
Mhm.
have any answers, but I have learned a lot today. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome. And see, that's what's part of, I know you probably, not a lot of people get excited when talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, but because I do, guys. I get excited about it because I see the effects of it day in and day out, no matter where I am, where I'm working, and who I'm helping right now. And one of the endeavors I took on was starting a company called Olive Branch Seniors. And with Olive Branch Seniors, I'm trying out something that's so similar to a nurse case manager in a hospital, but it stays within the hospital facility and goes outside to all areas of life outside of just medical, right? So it's called a life care manager, and I'm also kind of calling it a life care manager on steroids because with having worked in facilities and ran the different facilities, which I also like to call communities, y'all, it's a little less sterile. Um, I've seen so many different aspects and so many different roads that people have had to take or decide, and I want to take life care management to a whole different level. And that is adapting families with the tools as well, such as what y'all are creating right now through AI, but walking them through step by step how to build a plan ahead of time. And so we will go out and we will learn about that person's specific needs, and that's whether they are still fully independent and they're afraid to tell their families or to go to the doctor. Then we're going to encourage the why, and then we're going to go with them to do that and build out a plan that has all of the what ifs for them built in. And if we have all of the what ifs squared away, I think that also makes it a little bit easier for that person to face what's to come because they've already gone through what the worst case scenarios would be and they've made a plan for what that would be and they've been a part of it. And in that sense, we can also then help them maintain their independence a little bit longer just by having those things prepared. And hey, how can technology help? We can use technology to set medication reminders, right? We can use technology to where they can have a device at their house and they can check their own blood pressure, blood sugars, just like you're talking about with the telehealth. We can have all of that set up and it can give them verbal cues, it can give them alerts, and somebody can pop on the screen and start telling them, hey, why don't you look here for the remote control if you need to? But bringing the anxiety down of that particular moment of stress just by having somebody there immediately when we can't drive across town. I mean, I live in Dallas, and let me tell you, sometimes to go 13 miles, it's 45 minutes, you
Yeah.
know. I don't have time to do that, not even for some of my clients to get there in time to help settle what their concern is. So the virtual aspect of it is a big deal, and I get excited about the opportunities that y'all talk about. And then it makes it easier to talk to the people affected because they have more solutions. So if you guys create more solutions through AI and I get access to them, I can talk to them about it. And it literally just takes so much weight and so many bricks off the shoulders that weigh us down, with the possibilities. And so
Mhm.
that's something that we're doing with Olive Branch seniors. And as we've been going through all these different topics, and we've talked about how it can branch off down so many different roads for different people. If somebody would like to maybe comment with their email address or private message it to you guys, whatever communication you utilize, I can then send out any particular type of free resources that are available to them. And I'd be happy to get them, some general information or information that just kind of answers a quick question maybe they've been battling in their head in regards to themselves or a family member at the same time.
Yeah, Jenny, I'm definitely looking forward to how many family will reach out to you with questions, and I think we need to really, like you said, we have so many things that we want to talk about. But like, look,
Mhm.
it's about just what Jenny just said, right?
Mhm.
Reach out to her about that. But
Yeah.
one thing you might not know from the short conversation is Jenny's working on policy and legislation,
Mhm.
right? She's looking at challenge faced by the family, just like she described.
Yeah.
She can talk about support for caregivers. What sort of
Mhm.
support does a caregiver need? There's free ones, maybe the one that costs some money. But public awareness and education is that big, broad topics that we really have to
Huge topic.
start discussion and start moving the pebbles around.
Mhm.
And research funding, personal impact, future outlook, call to action. You have so many things that we can talk about. Whether we listed here on the show notes, it's just that we're not able to cover it. But before we jump
Yeah.
off this call, I want to really emphasize on
Mhm.
AI's contribution to this topic. So going
Mhm.
back to what we did last summer, Jenny's mentioned that if you have a sandwich on the fridge, mom, like please go get it. When we say that to a person with a cognitive ability, it just sounds funny because that's what we do all the time. Mom, it's already in the
Yeah.
fridge, go get it. But for an Alzheimer dementia person, it's not the same because by
It's
the time they even
demeaning.
get to the
Yeah.
fridge, they already forgot why they're in front of the fridge and they move on.
Mhm.
But one of the things that deteriorates their health over time is that because they didn't eat that sandwich, they ended up snacking on everything but that sandwich. And that diet, that bad diet that starts with snacks and not having meals,
Mhm.
causes other health problems to arise. So, as a family member, you really are stressed by the fact that they're not eating, and when they do eat, they're eating snacks, and then they have now high blood pressure and all sorts of other things that they didn't have before this stage 4 or stage 3 diagnosis. So, um, one of the things that Jenny, you got really excited. I
I
appreciate
did.
that.
I have a
You
story.
hit
I
the
have a
target.
story for you on the
Yeah.
snack thing real fast. Oh my gosh, you brought something to my mind. I hope you don't mind.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so in the very first building I ever worked in was an assisted living memory care out in Longview, Texas.
Mm,
And when you're talking about how if they are still hungry and they don't know where that healthy food is, they're just going to go back. Well, remember they're going backwards in time, right? Too. So we're going back to when we did eat more junk food and we
mhm,
did drink more cokes and sodas and stuff. And I had one resident that would come to the memory care door and just bang, bang, bang on it, looking through the little window out and down the hallway to the assisted living. He knew that there was a Coke machine around the corner. He could not forget that. He could forget if he'd eaten that day or what he did 10 minutes ago, but he never forgot there was a Coke
mm,
machine, or excuse me, a Dr. Pepper machine
others.
around the corner. He was so obsessed with Dr. Pepper. So sweet families that would come visit their loved ones, he would ask, hey, if I get you $1, would you go to the Dr. Pepper machine and get me Dr. Pepper, please? They would do it, but then they thought, oh, I'll go an extra step. And some of them started bringing him Dr. Peppers to keep in his room. One lady would bring 2-liter Dr. Peppers for him. And unfortunately, nobody else knew he had diabetes. All right. So his family still wanted that controlled and wanted to control the amount of sugar he was intaking, thus the amount of Dr. Peppers he was intaking. So imagine somebody that is that sick with, as you said, Lucky, a comorbidity,
Mhm.
and they don't know that it's making things worse for them in other routes, and they don't have a sense of control. And there is that chemical in the brain that says, I need more, I need more, I need more, right? And then you've got sweet families coming through. You know what? Ultimately, he got so much Dr. Pepper, it just had to be rationed, basically. But
Mhm.
we did have the Dr. Pepper man come when he was still in the machine and come back and meet him in all of his Dr. Pepper uniform and brought him a little sign that he had to take from another shopping center of some sort and gave it to him for his room. And oh man, it was the most magical day of his life, you would think, that the Dr. Pepper man came and saw him. But yes, so diabetes, the
Yeah.
not having the meals and just being stuck on the past, that brought my mind to that story.
And you're looking at a visual cue as the Dr. Pepperman came through, and Alzheimer's
Uh-huh.
dementia patients, because of their age going backward, they do
Hmm.
tend to focus on visual cues, audio cues, and that was our specialty on AI Solutions to
Hmm.
figure out how do we do audio cue and visual cue that
Mhm.
is literally as free as possible and it can be, right? And then
Yeah.
also as available as it can be, because a lot of the data process that we have to do in order to do this audio and video visual cue, it's widely available today, and we have to really
Uh-huh.
take it from home to home and make it look like the daughter comes alive on the TV and says, "Mom, you have to eat something." And this is not the daughter that said anything; it's the audio is being said through her by using her face and moving her
Oh my
lips,
goodness!
right?
Wow.
And this is as virtual as seeing her sweat pores in her skin. That's how detailed that situation is.
That
So
could
I
help
can.
so much in giving medications, y'all,
That's
and
right.
people not wanting to when we would have to call the family members and say, "Hey, can you tell your mom to let us give her this med that she has to take it?" Or a behavior of agitation where only the daughter or son can
Daughter,
calm that
son,
person
or
down.
or
Pretty
even a
cute.
movie star,
Ah.
like Harrison Ford just pops up on the TV says, "Dorothy, take your medicine," you know.
Ronald Reagan.
But this requires
No, not
very
Nancy
little.
Reagan. Don't do drugs.
Yeah.
Nancy Reagan. No. Just say
No, but you
no.
know what? You're hitting on something, and I've been getting chills the whole time you've been talking. Is our brain is a special thing, and you just mentioned with that guy, that special individual, being that not being that, maybe losing some cognitive ability, but the fact that the pleasure sense in his another part of the brain knows that it loves Dr. Pepper and it overrides or it helps the other part of the brain that maybe had lost whatever cognitive ability, he's still tying being able to tie new memories because he loves it. He's able to tie a new memory. But other than that, but that's an amazing detail that I'm sure could be used some way somehow later. But I get lost in the minutia. But wow, that is an amazing story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because like you said, that TV remote, the Siri and Alexa. What
yeah,
if there's IoT devices that are your lights? So if the light is blinking, that means the person is paying attention to the light blinking by the fridge, and the time of the day is for the fridge to open. So the visual audio cue comes on, open the fridge, grab your sandwich, right? So these patterns help the family, just like it cares for the patients, just like a person will be able to take care of themselves because they're not bedridden, right?
Right.
So these are the devices that you already have at home using your camera to see if there's a fire in the house, right? But if there's a dementia patient, how do we use that camera to say, "Mom, don't cook because it's not necessary to cook right now. Food is already there. But if
Yeah.
you are cooking, the fire is too high and maybe it needs to be turned down or
Mm.
there's a fire actually in the house." So
Yeah.
you have all sorts of categories that I think one of the things that you mentioned that you're creating a list of if then, right? See, if then once you deliver the if then, what happens next is AI. If you deliver if then, you have to look at the word else. If then else, right? Because if you're doing this, a human say if then, AI will say what else, right?
Ah.
Because if the fire is to the level of cooking, that's good. But if the fire is boiling the water, that means it's bad,
Mhm.
But if the fire is all over the kitchen, it's really bad. Somebody has to call 911. And we've seen that with
Mhm.
Alzheimer's dementia patients where the
Yes.
fire is all over the house and they're outside of the house
You,
looking at the house thinking,
you know what
what's
could be done? With all these different ideas, and I hate to, the most comforting voice is your mother's.
oh yeah.
If you could get
Ah,
an
yes.
AI of your
Right.
there, I think it would always that would work. Just say, you know what, can I have a picture of your mother, and then
Right.
make an AI and always have that because once they get to a certain point,
Mhm.
that voice would just or
That's right.
that picture,
That's right.
something like that.
Yeah.
We can do that now with
Yeah.
AI,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Yep.
have it
Picture
even
becomes alive. Picture becomes a video. That's what
yeah,
AI specialized in
Wow.
these days. Like
and
click on
and
a
that
picture, that picture becomes alive like a video.
that
Wow.
that would I think would really really
Mhm.
help.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's a technology now that's just so available.
So
Chat
available.
GPT, the new version of it, it's so unbelievable the way it talks and
That's right.
communicates now. It's light years. I mean, it's more than I thought we'd achieve in 2 years.
And,
We've seen this grow, but
and,
definitely, wow.
I
and
want to send a picture of my grandma to you guys and let you try to create that for my mom. For if she ends up with dementia, I would love for y'all just to test it out with her pictures and information and see
it's
what
that
you could do.
simple. It's literally a
Oh
picture
my goodness.
that you can turn into a live, and that person is
Yeah,
moving, that person is speaking. You should
Hmm.
go to YouTube and look up the celebrities that sings a song
Yeah.
that is not from their era. So somebody from 1930 singing about I don't know Jennifer Lopez maybe or something like that, right?
Yeah.
wow.
But I want you to think about it from this use case perspective that is so exciting to 24 hours in a day, because that's just one meal. But what happens throughout 24 hours a day, 48 hours
Hmm.
later, and 48 months later? Because if you start on a phase one and early detection, this is why it's so important that the person who thinks they are having Alzheimer's dementia help prepare their family. These are sort of the cues, like you said, the mother's voice. Record that mother's voice early so that when the mother's voice is being replicated to tell the family member to say, mom said do this, you do this. But in the phase one, it starts. Think about by phase four, their AI has grown with them, right? So
Yeah.
48 months later, when they're in phase four, from 48 months later, that AI has grown to the point that it knows the 24-hour schedule of that said person. And it's not just remember, if then means 8 o'clock sharp, the alarm will go off and tell the person to eat breakfast. Well, AI looks at it from the perspective like, oh, this person isn't awake yet. When he's awake, I will tell him to get the meal, right? If
Hmm.
then
Sure.
else. If 8 o'clock he's not awake, why bother waking him up? When he's up, tell him to get the food. And then once you eat the breakfast, you have a cycle like a medicine, then you have to really say like, hey, if you're going outside, put your clothes on, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yes, please.
reason we were a failure in the very early stage is because we didn't think about any device other than their cell phone.
Yeah.
We were basing our assumption that they have a cell phone in their hands. Majority of Alzheimer dementia patients do not carry device or even clothes on them,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
When somebody clothes them, they don't care to put the clothes on. So when we were failing without the subject matter expert, this is the learn lessons that we had to learn in order to say, well, if they don't carry a device, why are we doing AI solution through that
Mhm.
device? We have to do
Yeah.
IoT device, and we have to really make it as simple data as possible. And
Hmm.
um, this conversation is so fascinating. This conversation is so game changing. But one thing I want to say, like I said, if it starts on day one and 48 months later, but think about it from if it starts here from this small of a use case, how does that impact the future of the workforce, the caregiving, that 2-to-1
Hmm.
ratio, opportunity
Huge.
cost for your grandkids, right? Opportunity cost that a 16-year-old kid probably has to take care of grandma rather than going out there pursuing their passion of singing and doing other things like playing soccer,
Yeah.
right? What's the opportunity cost here? What can happen to grandma if AI was augmenting that grandson or grandkid to say, AI got it. We probably can do a
Hmm.
whole lot more for ourselves because we take care of grandma and taking care of ourselves. So that way, there's no loss in opportunities. Um,
Hmm.
I want to extend this conversation all the way for another 2 hours, but let's stop here. Let's put some last minute thoughts in here. I love this conversation, very passionate. Like I said, I lost sleep over this conversation yesterday. Just to, put the data together. But it's not always about data. It's about just looking at the human side of things and say, what is available and what can we do? And what's available today is so available that
Mhm.
people not knowing it is the reason it's going to the waste. It's not being utilized for its proper function, and
Yeah.
it's widely available for free. We can just tap into it and say, if this works for your mom and dad, how many other
Mhm.
mom and dad does this work for? How many other grandma does it work for? How many other sons and daughter does it work for? Because a lot of the people are having Alzheimer dementia situation early in stage, right? Where mom and
Mhm.
dad is the ones taking care of them. So
Hmm.
reverse that situation and talk through the data in a ways like with Jenny, who's a subject matter expert on this topic, and let's start resolving these issues by augmenting the people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so exciting. The potential it can have not
Hmm.
only on the care for the resident or the senior or for their caregivers, but the economy, as you said. I will tell you right now, 57% of people in the workforce, their job is affected by this disease alone, not including all the other things people are fighting, but this disease alone. I'm going to give you just two other quick things of data is 18% of those people at some point have a suicidal ideation, of those caregivers. So you could literally be saving lives. I know with Alzheimer's and dementia, you can't save the life of that person, but you could potentially be looking at saving the lives of some of the caregivers through making it less stressful. And then you get down to another 9% of those 18% that are affected from full time to part time jobs. 9% of them end up quitting their job altogether, just because they can't do both. And you add on a lot of people have teenagers that they're also taking care of and running around to their programs. I
Hmm.
can see why mentally a lot of caregivers will have some issues coming from this. So let's go save those lives.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Lucky.
Wow, my head is exploding with ideas.
Mhm.
Um, and so the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to digress, is uh, we used to always have this thing where we take AI and we take it into what do you think about AI in a movie, and we talk about Terminator and what AI is going to be and how it's going to destroy the world and private. But we've gotten past a lot of those conversations to the point now where um, I, but I am gonna bite a little bit back on the stuff that we did in the past. Because do you guys remember the movie with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore called 50 First Dates?
Yes,
Hey,
Okay,
yes.
yes,
Love that.
remember at the end
that's what it
he had
is.
just gone through hell and back trying to figure out,
Uh-huh.
okay, how am I gonna keep my love
Right.
who doesn't know who I am
Right.
every day loving me? And it's
Mhm.
like he kept, and then he figured out, okay, as long as I can keep her on a schedule, I know that she's gonna wake up. She's
Right.
gonna look over. She's
Right.
gonna say, "Read this."
Yeah.
She's gonna start looking at it, and then she realizes where she's at that moment in time and space.
Right.
We could almost create a cycle for people with that same type of, physically where they in I hate to say in a box, but basically give them a controlled environment
Mhm.
where they can feel comfortable, and then maybe the AI with mom comes up and says, "Have you taken your medicine? Have you drank your milk today?
Right. That's right.
You know
That's
what?
Yeah.
Go brush your teeth."
right.
And then it can somehow alleviate that, because right now that the thing is we're trying to figure out how do we solve that thing for X of people,
Mhm.
and AI has been really good at becoming that X. So who knows what that is in the future? But I'm really excited with a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. And honestly, we could work at probably putting something like this together. But I've had a great time today. Thank you, Jenny,
Oh, thank you
Jenny.
guys. I'm
Yeah,
getting excited too from it. So.
yeah.
So I think without a doubt you get another chance of saying ay 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 ay, but I think you tell us your emotion because mine is like "Ah."
Ay, 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 ay.
Yeah,
Yes,
girl.
Yeah, I'm
I am
feeling it now.
excited about that. Ay, 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 ay.
Everybody's excited after this episode.
Yeah.
So Jenny, we always have this podcast door open for you. So any updates you have, any other episodes you want to
Thank
do,
you.
we're always going to have you back. Until the next time you come, Jenny. Adios, ciao, and see you soon.
Thank you guys.